Hi, it's Maria from Still Dreaming Homestead. I'm glad you're here with me today. I'm sorry, I'm not sure why my camera is having such a um, foggy picture, but I can't seem to get it to adjust right. So today's Father's Day, and I wanted to talk a little bit about fatherhood and about my father. My father, Albert Weathers, and he was born in 1934 in November. And I always felt very blessed to have him as my dad. Well, almost always. He was a great dad to me. And I just wanted to tie some of the things that we can learn in the scriptures about fathers to some of the real life experiences that I had with my own dad. In Genesis, it talks about the creation of earth, and that God created the heavens and earth and everything that was therein. And of course, my dad and my mom helped create myself and my two brothers. It was a wonderful, creative act of love. And I'm so thankful that they had that time of really loving each other in their early years when they were young. When God made Adam and Eve and placed them in the garden, he gave them a job, and the job was to tend the garden. My dad was very good at giving us jobs too. Sometimes I liked them, sometimes I didn't, but I always learned from those jobs, and I'm thankful for them now. The only thing I really didn't learn, men jobs. So my dad's was old enough that women and men were seen very distinctly different in their interests and in their strengths. And so we held to that in our household. And I don't feel any the worse for it. I did not learn how to work on a car other than how to check my oil. And I think he showed me one time how to change a tire, but I never really wanted to do that. And being a woman, I really never had to. Dad taught me to dig and to mow grass, to do a good job on dishes because he was a stickler, how to mop a floor, clean. He taught me all those things. He taught me that when it was time for me to get a job, that I was always to be a productive employee for whoever I'm working for, to do the very best job I could. Dad was a wonderful provider. Like God provided for Adam and Eve everything they would need in the Garden of Eden, and ever since, everything we will need. My dad was a wonderful provider. He worked hard. He had different jobs. He worked as a carpenter. He worked as a storekeeper. He worked at a mine. He worked as a shovel operator, an equipment operator. I think the favorite thing for him, though, was the carpentry. Because there you could be more creative. It wasn't doing the same thing all the time because Dad was not good at wanting to do the same thing all the time, and neither am I. Dad had great love for his family. Now, all of us weren't treated exactly the same, and that's okay. We all had our individual relationships with Dad. Mom had her individual relationship. Now, their marriage was a rough marriage, and it is one that did not last forever. But I remember Mom and Dad going dancing. Mom would be dressed up, and I thought she was the most beautiful woman I could ever imagine. She would wear beautiful dresses that were very form-fitting and had glitter or sequins on them. Dad, on the other hand, I never really saw him in much of anything besides Levi's and either a t-shirt or a button-up shirt, but usually a t-shirt. He kept his hair nice and neat, and when he was young, it was a style to have ducktails. They would brush their hair back and it would kind of stick out, I guess, like a duck's tail. Dad was not a good follower, and he did not follow that particular style. My dad was not a big man. He was about 5'5", 5'6". But when I was little, I just thought he was huge. It never dawned on me that he wasn't a tall man. Even when he was working with my grandpa, his dad, who was about 6 foot tall, maybe 5'11", I never saw my dad as any shorter than my grandpa. God also holds us accountable. He teaches us in His Word and through our conscience right from wrong. And my dad was very good at that. One thing that stands out very strongly to me is that lying was completely off the board for anybody to do. You did not lie, no matter what. He used to say, now, if you've done, whatever, wrong, and you talk to me about it, that's one thing. But if I find out you lied about it, you're in twice the trouble. And that was really true. And because of that, I never, ever, ever wanted to lie to my dad. In fact, I've never really wanted to lie to anybody. And I give Dad a lot of the credit for that. Now, Dad wasn't a perfect man, but he was a hard worker. He loved his family. He was a strong man. And then, as the years went by, when Dad was 61, it was interesting because I'm older than that now. And at 61, he was convinced he would die the next year because his father had died at 62. His father's all but one brother, maybe two brothers, had died at 62. He had uncles that had all died at 62. So that was a year he really thought that was going to be the end, and it wasn't. But it was really shortly after that that my dad developed kidney cancer. Well, he'd probably had it before. And that was a serious cancer. It was even discussed whether or not to do any treatment because of the old thought that if you cut, you just spread it. But in the end, Dad chose to have his kidney removed, and he survived that. 6 months later, though, he began not to be able to walk from the car into his house, which was not very far. My dad was a very active man and a hard worker. He was still working at these ages that this was happening, and for him to have to stop to catch his breath, that was a big deal. So I went with him to the hospital to be checked out, despite the fact he didn't want me to. And in the end result, we found out that he needed a 4-way bypass. But it was interesting. While he was waiting for that to happen, my dad decided to become vegan and to begin pushing himself to walk. And when it was time for the surgery, I don't remember if it took a month and a half, they were astonished how much better my dad was doing. He had the bypass surgery, and that turned out being much easier on him than the kidney surgery. And he began to heal from that, and he continued working. And then he got another cancer, showed up, and it was a melanoma skin cancer. That would be the one that would take my dad's life. That was a hard road for us. It's still hard for me, and it's 11 years later. But it was interesting. When Dad was getting ready to have some of these surgeries, I remember one, and I believe it was the heart surgery. I was in there with him, and they were talking about, the surgery, and they wanted to do give Dad an experimental blood replacement. And Dad said if he needed it. And Dad said, well, yes. And I said, no, Dad, this is too serious of a surgery. It's not an easy surgery. Don't do it. And he said, if it could help somebody else, that's what I want to do. The other thing he said as he was going through these things is, I would feel bad. They had so many things happen one after another. And despite the fact that he was doing all he could to live a healthy lifestyle, and he would say when something would happen, it never seemed to bother him. He'd say, why shouldn't it be me? I'm no better than anybody else. So Dad was a humble man. He was strong. When he was young, I think he was quite a bit of a scrapper. But I was really proud to have him as my dad. It was important to him to teach all of us right from wrong. And in his later years, my dad accepted Christ. Now, he never felt better than anybody else because he was a Christian. He just was glad that he came to know the Lord. And it gave him peace, and it gave me peace. And I think that's the most important thing that we can give our children, is that peace of knowing that we are Christians, that we are ready when our time comes to pass away. We're ready. And that the next thing we'll know will be when we wake up with no pain and with all joy, that we will get to be with Christ. And we will get to be with our families. Now, this part sounds silly. It's a little sad. I'll try not to cry. When my dad was it was at the last few minutes of his life, And he couldn't talk anymore. I leaned down to him and I said, Dad, I want to make sure you know the Lord and that you've asked him into your heart. Because when Jesus comes back and it's time for us to be caught up in the air with him, I want you beside me because you know I'm afraid of heights. It was just such a silly thought. And because we won't be afraid then. But it would be an honor to be beside my dad when we get to rise up and meet Christ. So I hope all of you fathers out there had a wonderful day today and came to recognize how important you are to your children, to your wife, to your grandchildren. You are a cornerstone. That's how God placed you. And I'm thankful for all the effort you put into it. It's got to feel very unappreciated a lot of times. But you make a difference. And my dad made a difference. And I hope just this little talk makes a difference in your life, makes you realize you're important. So it's Maria from Still Dreaming Homestead. I want to pray blessings on you and yours, in your house, out of your house, in the day and the night. Whatever you do, keep dreaming.